Welcome. This is another book which I think is extremely important in terms of the law of forensics in Uganda. It's very unfortunate today that in Uganda we don't have many schools or law schools that teach forensic law. The only school that I remember was doing it was, I think, UCU, which I think scrapped it off, and I think Nkumba University, which was doing under the Institute of Criminal Justice, which I'm told they're probably going to scrap it off. And yet the essence of this book will give you answers to some of the problems that this country has been facing over a period of time. I mean, how many times have we seen people who have been killed using, mafia-like motorbike, firing squads and stuff like that. Poison killings from the different generals and different people, from the likes of the Chiwetel and the like, all those answers. So this book answers and lays down the principles that are supposed to be required, even in terms of gun technology, in terms of, tear gas. Incredibly, tear gas is listed as a weapon that should not actually be used in terms of ordinary civilians, but in terms of it's chemical. So these arguments are propounded in this book in terms of you explaining to you what is required in terms of understanding forensic law in Uganda. So, for example, I talk about the origin of forensic, but perhaps for starters, I'll emphasize that your hair, a simple hair, or even your scent, or even your nail that has been cut off, your DNA, your blood splatter, all those things can give you away in terms of proving whether or not someone committed an offense. And remember, in criminal cases, it's a question of proving beyond reasonable doubt. So that's why I make the argument in terms of beyond a shadow of doubt. Obviously, there is a difference in terms of beyond reasonable doubt and beyond the shadow of doubt. I make comparisons. So some of you probably heard of the trial of the century in terms of the O.J. Simpson trial. I make comparisons in terms of what is required in terms of the proof of DNA that can prove you up to 99.99%. So I make those arguments in terms of the prepositions of what we need to do. I lay guidelines in terms of what is required for purposes of, for example, the origin of autopsy, aspects to do with mummifications, forensic toxicology, aspects to do with ballistics, aspects to do with the anthropometry, fingerprints, the use of DNA, the different methods of testing DNA, the PCR, the STR, aspects to do with doctors giving evidence in court, aspects to do, for example, with expert psychological autopsy, motivation analysis, determination of torture. How do you preserve, for example, a crime scene? Every time we see a challenge here, for example, you are witnesses. You saw last time what happened when an attempt was made on an individual. Who were the first respondents? Did they preserve the scene of the crime? Wasn't the scene contaminated? Do we need to have procedural guidelines in terms of what is required in terms of drawing sketches or even laboratory procedural guidelines, rather than every time we have a challenge in terms of what we need to do, we simply run to Scotland Yard in England, and they come and then they never give us substantive results, or maybe those remain as a question of privilege. So aspects to do with witnesses, aspects to do with summons, aspects to do with guilt, aspects to do with verdicts, recording of pleas, aspects to do with evaluation of the scenes, aspects to do with forensic pathology, aspects to do with chain of custody, aspects to do with what they call forensic victimologists, and in practice, in terms of the forensic context, in terms of traditional victimology, so that you know exactly what is required when you're doing forensic law in this country. Descriptive sections. So this entire book is strictly about the law of forensics. You're going to talk about the footwear and tire impressions, casting after photography, aspect to saliva, semen, when it comes, for example, with rape cases and stuff like that, labeling evidence, firearms, for example, labeling cartridges, documentations of photographic ammunition, tool marking evidence. All these things are important for you in terms of you understanding what. And we have cited case law, by the way. The most recent, what they call locus classicus cases, aspects to do with most interesting cases. For example, we have one of Zabulake versus UWBS Wabang, Qualcomm versus Broadcom Corporation. We have also got Ugandan cases in the likes of Bamote versus Uganda, and the case of Eneko, and another versus Omona. And all these cases are interesting. And then there's also, of course, the local cases like Uganda versus Uwera and Senga, which also give you Godi versus Uganda, all those aspects. And we've also got Simon Mokose versus R. So all these cases will argue in terms of what is required and in terms of what went wrong, or in terms of what was required in terms of collecting evidence. So this forensics law becomes a question of importance, because we don't want to inculcate people who are actually innocent. We want to find people who are guilty, and we can prove them beyond reasonable doubt, as is required in criminal procedure. So God bless you, and thank you for your attention. Find this at lubogo.org and suegeneslawup.com.